This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Otelli Edwards. Tonight's top stories. China voices deep concerns about consequences that could follow Israel's airstrikes on Iran. Japan, too, strongly condemning the attack, which targeted nuclear sites and killing senior commanders. Now, condolences pouring in from world leaders, including China's Xi Jinping, to his Indian counterpart after yesterday's Air India plane crash that killed more than 260 people. Campaigning begins for Tokyo's 127-seat Metropolitan Assembly, a bellwether for how voters may swing in next month's crucial upper house election. And North Korea says it has successfully relaunched a repaired destroyer and plans to build 2 more next year. Also in East Asia tonight, Taiwan tests what could be its next secret weapon at sea, and it's learning from Ukraine's military successes against Russia, using smaller and cheaper tools that promise to pack a punch. The Polish president says he believes China can be a stabilizing factor to end Russia's war in Ukraine. He speaks with CNA in an exclusive interview. Well, before we get to the Israel-Iran conflict, here is an update on yesterday's Air India crash. India Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited injured victims of the country's worst civil aviation disaster in decades. All but one of the 242 people on board the Boeing Dreamliner were killed. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping and other world leaders have sent their condolences. And Mr. Modi met the sole survivor from flight AI-17 that was bound for London. Now, Vishwash Kumar Ramesh is a 40-year-old visitor from Britain. His older brother was on the same flight and did not survive. Mr. Ramesh told local media he heard a loud noise 30 seconds after takeoff. Some are calling his survival a miracle. And Mr. Modi earlier visited the neighborhood where the aircraft went down. He also chaired a meeting and was briefed by officials on rescue operations. Local media said Mr. Modi issued directives to ensure affected families and the injured receive support. Relatives of victims have been waiting anxiously for news of their loved ones. Air India says the investigation will take some time. Well, teams of experts from both the US and the UK are being sent to India to help with investigations, along with support from aircraft and engine makers Boeing and GE Aerospace. For more, Rebecca Bundan, she joins us live now from Ahmedabad. Rebecca, obviously it's a difficult time for everybody involved. What more can you tell us about the latest recovery efforts on the ground?
Yes, I mean, there have been efforts going on all day. At the site, the investigations have started with that area being cordoned off and forensic teams are on site. We're here at the hospital where there's a lot of activity going on. There's an ambulance coming through just now. Families have been gathering here all day. It seems that some of the bodies are now starting to be handed over to some of the families, but people have been coming here, grieving relatives. They've been giving DNA samples as there are tests being done to try to identify many of the bodies which remain unidentified. Some of the families here saying that that's a process that could take 3 days in some cases. But very much the focus now is also on those investigation efforts with the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board in India overseeing this investigation, also joined by US and UK teams that will help with that investigation as they try to establish the cause of the accident. Everybody asking questions about this, how such an extreme crash could take place. But still a lot of focus as well on dealing with the families of the victims. There are some people who have been injured who are here at the hospital because it wasn't just people on the plane that were affected. That plane crashed into a residential area and there were other people on the ground that were impacted, and we have yet to see those final numbers that come through once we know how many people on the ground were also affected.
Meantime, Rebecca, the hunt for the aircraft's black boxes continues, I believe. These devices, I mean, they're essential in terms of telling us about moments leading up to the crash, isn't it?
They really are critical. There are two black boxes in this case. There's one that would have a lot of the data in terms of altitude and so on of the plane that could give a lot of insights into what happened. There's another that collects voice recordings from the cockpit. So that's also really important to gather that information. That what can we hear from the pilots from within the plane? We know that they made that Mayday call, but then after that, the signal was lost. Nothing was heard from them. Of course, the plane came down. There was that huge explosion and fire, and as we know, 241 people out of 242 killed. There are other investigations going on in terms of gathering evidence at the site. With those black boxes, it can take some 10 to 15 days to analyse that data, so that will take time. And when we look at the final report, that actually won't come through for a whole year, the very final report on this crash from the Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau. But these investigations are ongoing, and at the moment the teams are just trying to gather as much information over the next couple of days from the site of the crash to try to establish what happened.
Many thanks for that report. Rebecca Bundan there reporting to us live from Ahmedabad. And do keep up with the latest on CNA platforms, on TV, radio, and our website, cna.asia, or via our mobile app. Now, the other big news for the day, Israel has struck some 100 targets in Iran overnight, including Tehran's nuclear and military sites. The attack appears to be the most significant one Iran has faced since its 1980s war with Iraq. Well, Iranian state media says the Israeli strikes killed senior figures, including the armed forces chief and top nuclear scientists. Now, Iran's supreme leader warned Israel it will face harsh punishment and a bitter and painful fate for the attacks. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the operation, dubbed Rising Lion, was meant to cripple Tehran's ability to produce a nuclear weapon, which he said was advancing to the point of no return. He said the operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove the threat. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump said he was aware Israel was going to conduct these strikes, but stressed that Washington was not involved. He said that Tehran cannot have a nuclear bomb and hopes to get back to the negotiating table. Mr. Trump also says the U.S. is ready to defend itself and Israel if Iran retaliates. Israel says Iran has launched around 100 drones towards its territory and that the army is working to intercept them. The country has declared a state of emergency in anticipation of retaliation. Israeli media report that an order for citizens to remain near protected areas have been lifted, suggesting that any immediate danger may be over. Well, China, meantime, has expressed concern following Israel's attacks on Iran, calling it a violation of Tehran's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Beijing is calling on all parties to avoid further escalation and says it is willing to play a constructive role in easing tensions.
中方高度关注以色列袭击伊朗，对有关行动可能带来的严重后果深感担忧。中方反对侵犯伊朗主权、安全和领土完整，反对激化矛盾、扩大冲突。
Japan also condemned Israel's strikes, saying it escalates the situation. The country's foreign minister urged all parties to exercise restraint. Heightened tensions in the Middle East have sent oil prices up sharply on fears that a wider conflict could disrupt supplies. While the developments looming over a sector already grappling with weak global economic outlook and increased output from oil-producing nations. A global benchmark Brent futures surged as much as 13% following Israel's strikes against Iran. WTI crude moved in the same direction, but prices for both contracts have since come off their intraday highs. And those gains were the largest since 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, Iran's oil ministry has reported no damage to the country's refining facilities and oil depots. It added that operations and supply are ongoing with interruption. Analysts say if Iran's oil assets were targeted, as much as 1.7 million barrels per day of export supply could be at risk, which would be enough to push the market into a deficit over the second half of the year. Another key concern, the Strait of Hormuz, About a fifth of the world's total oil consumption passed through this shipping lane. OPEC members Saudi Arabia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait and Iraq use this strait to export most of their crude to Asia. Now, the renewed geopolitical risks in markets also sent investors fleeing into safe haven assets. Gold climbed as much as 1.6%, but it has since pared back gains. Now, for the very latest, Trent Murray he joins us live from Tel Aviv. Now, Trent, we mentioned that Israel has ended an alert asking citizens to stay near these protected areas. Are there any more fears then of retaliation from Iran?
I think the broader fear that Iran is going to retaliate in a strong way certainly remains. The immediate lifting of that shelter-in-place order, we understand, has been done because those 100 drones that were fired by Iran were successfully intercepted by the IDF as they traversed across the Middle East towards the country. But there certainly is a broader concern, I think, that a larger retaliation may still be coming, including one that involves the use of ballistic missiles. We know, of course, Iran does have a fairly large ballistic missile stockpile, and they are missiles that take really only about 10 minutes from launch to arrive in Israel. So there's certainly a level of vigilance here. We do know that a number of precautions are being taken in anticipation of that potential retaliation. We know at, for example, Ben Gurion International Airport, pretty well all of the commercial aircraft there have now been evacuated. It is effectively an empty airport. Those planes have been flown to places like Cyprus and Greece to avoid them being damaged in any sort of missile strike. We also know a number of hospitals have activated their emergency plans and have cleared their underground parking lots in order to be able to administer medical care underground if there are strikes on the surface. So it certainly doesn't feel like this is over yet. Just before coming on air, in fact, it seems that there's now been a sixth wave of airstrikes across Iran targeting the cities of Shiraz. And so I think this is going to be a long couple of hours and days ahead as this operation continues and the sort of waiting game continues on how Iran will respond.
So, Trent, tell us a bit more about what Israel is saying about its objective with these, what it calls preemptive strikes against Iran.
Well, look, I mean, in many ways, this is a complicated military attack that took place. I mean, we're talking about 200 fighter jets from the Israeli Air Force participating, targeting 100 separate sites. But the goal from the Israelis' perspective is a relatively simple one. They are trying to halt Iran's nuclear enrichment capabilities, trying to prevent Tehran getting its hands on a nuclear weapon, because in their view, that poses an existential threat to the very existence of Israel, given Tehran's very public telegraphing and messaging around its desire to see the state of Israel come to an end. So this, of course, is a decades-old conflict in many ways that has been brewing. There's long been tensions between these two sides, but what makes it different now is it does feel like Israel is emboldened right now in order to take this step. It has in many ways defeated a number of Iran's proxies in this region, including Hezbollah, to Hamas as well to some degree. And so by removing those off the chessboard now, it feels that the Israelis felt like this was their opportunity to try and settle the score with Iran and to destroy its nuclear enrichment facilities. Now, of course, time is going to tell whether that goal is one that is achieved, but we certainly are hearing that the US is supporting Israel. We've just heard from President Trump, who has said he had been given Iran multiple chances to reach an agreement on the nuclear deal, and that it will only get worse unless they come to the negotiating table and strike a deal with Washington. He has posted online that there is much more to come from Israel if a deal is not struck. So undoubtedly some complicated and worrying days ahead.
Hey, many thanks for that. CNA's Trent Murray live in Tel Aviv. Coming up next on East Asia tonight, equity markets weighed down as investors unload risky assets amid concerns of heightened tensions in the Middle East. Details on the market reaction next. Hello again. It's time now for business news with Roland Lim. So, Roland, tell us how sentiment is playing out in the markets after Israel's strike on Iran.
Right. Well, investors rushed out of risk assets, sending stock markets worldwide into the red following heightened tensions in the Middle East. The MSCI World Index is off its intraday lows. It is currently higher slightly by just 0.39%. Gold and oil producers were the outperformers globally as the risk-off sentiment sent commodity prices higher. Greater China markets mirroring those losses across the region. Shanghai Composite ending the day 0.75% lower. Shenzhen, the second bourse, worse off 1.1 in the red. And in Hong Kong, the benchmark Hang Seng Index down by 0.6%. Same pattern playing out in the Japanese stock markets. In Tokyo, the Nikkei 225 also down 0.9%. And the US dollar against the Japanese yen, well, that has picked up somewhat, up 0.41%. That's 144.07 to the dollar. Meanwhile, South Korean shares snapped a 7-day session rally that followed President Lee Jae-myung's election win. In Seoul, the Kospi benchmark index down 0.87%. South Korea's government has concluded that the nation does not face any immediate problem following the escalating tensions in the Middle East. The finance ministry has also pledged to take action if market volatility becomes excessive. And one analyst we spoke to says that market reaction was expected, but investors are wary about how long the conflict will last.
The first thing to highlight is that the script is playing out as you might expect in terms of an initial reaction, risk assets being sold off, proxies for a constriction of supply of oil spiking, geopolitical safe haven assets such as gold rallying. Interestingly, the dollar has resumed its appreciation against most currencies apart from the yen. Clearly, there's been a weakening of the dollar precipitously for the last few months. So it'll be interesting to see how FX dynamics play out. But then zooming back out, it really depends on whether this morphs into something more substantive than a head-on conflict, or whether it becomes regional, or it becomes global. If it's the former, then this kind of pullback of risk assets will ultimately find a stabilisation and dip buyers will come in. But you have to look at the setup coming into this event today. Equity markets were very, very fully valued, had rallied very strongly. Any excuse to look for some profit taking. So in that context, the initial reaction makes complete sense. We need to gauge the extent to which this becomes something bigger than just a localised conflict.
China's largest shipping company is reportedly among the consortium seeking to buy ports from Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison. The inclusion of China COSCO Shipping Corporation in the buying group may be a possible move to appease Beijing's concerns over the controversial deal. It's said to be one of the several Chinese state-backed companies in discussions to purchase some 43 ports from billionaire Li Ka-shing's conglomerate, two of which strategically located near the Panama Canal. The group is led by Italian firm Terminal Investment, a change that was announced last month by CK Hutch following China's scrutiny of former main investor BlackRock. The U.S. firm still part of the deal, with early reports suggesting it'll take over the Panama ports if the deal goes through. The sale, worth more than $19 billion, was highly opposed by China over worries of stunting its shipping and trade ambitions. CK Hutchison was accused by pro-Beijing media for giving in to the U.S. pressure, with authorities calling for firms to halt collaboration with Mr. Li and his family. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has touted the deal as a win for America's take-back of the strategic waterway. Electric vehicle sales in China have crossed the 1 million unit mark in May, marking the first time it surpassed that level in a single month for this year. And that's according to a report from market research firm Row Motion. The data show that strength in China helped offset weakness in North America to bring global sales of electric and plug-in hybrid vehicles in May 24% higher on year. The report said that growth in the Chinese market was lifted by strong domestic demand and Chinese automakers' targeted efforts to export into emerging markets. Notably, BYD's expanding market reach into Mexico and Southeast Asia helped boost sales. Whereas in North America, consumer demand for EVs dipped following the expiry of the Canadian government's zero-emission vehicle subsidy program. The figure comes as Global automakers face a 25% import tariff in the US. President Donald Trump said he may raise US auto tariffs in order to boost domestic auto manufacturing, a move that could further raise tensions with trading partners. His stance towards emission standards has also hampered EV growth in North America. Nearly all iPhone exports out of India went to the United States between the months of March and April. Now, this is a stark contrast from last year's average, where only half of Indian-made iPhones were US-bound, signaling a clear move by Apple to bypass high tariffs imposed on China. US customs data gathered by Reuters showed that contract manufacturer Foxconn exported iPhones worth some $3 billion from India, of which 97% shipped to the US. In the first 5 months of the year alone, Foxconn sent some $4.4 billion worth of the device, and that's close to a fifth higher than last year's figure. The data suggests an explicit shift by Apple to refocus their Indian production to serve almost exclusively to the US from European markets previously. The tech giant was under pressure during the escalating US-China trade assaults, as its main production base was in China. To avert the tariffs and uncertainty, Apple decided to ramp up Indian production of iPhones. The move drew criticism from President Trump, who rebuked the firm for not relocating manufacturing to the US. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung said that his government would focus on easing regulations to accelerate working-level tariff talks with Washington. This as part of broader support for companies on trade issues. His comments were made at a meeting with the heads of top conglomerates and other business leaders. Executives in attendance included leaders from Samsung Electronics, Hyundai Motor, and SK Group. Mr. Lee recognized that companies are currently having challenges in international competition and said that the government will focus on minimizing the difficulties. The sit-down marks Mr. Lee's first with the nation's powerful business leaders since winning the presidency last week. The future of South Korea's export-oriented economy is hinged on what kind of tariff deals that Mr. Lee can strike with President Trump. The country's key sectors, from chips to autos and shipbuilding, are heavily exposed to global trade. Toyota Motors chairman Akio Toyoda defended his seat for the job with an almost full support from shareholders during the carmaker's annual general meeting. The comeback in Mr. Toyoda's popularity following a dwindling of investor approvals through the years due to concerns around his leadership and safety scandals. Yesterday's re-election was a clear stamp of approval for the chair, with 96.72% of affirmative votes gathered. That was also the first time in 3 years that he ran unopposed by proxy advisors. This suggests endorsements from shareholders on how Mr. Toyoda handled certification reforms as well as an uncertain time in the auto industry. The result outweighing concerns surrounding Toyota's response to Trump's tariffs on cars and the firm's role in a buyout bid for Toyota Industries. Those issues not brought up during the AGM, despite being headlined at Toyota Industries' AGM earlier this week. Shareholders there voiced concern over the privatization plans, low tender offer, as well as why it falls short of what they believe is the company's intrinsic business value. And that'll do it for Business Otelli.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Right, we're going to go for a break now, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, campaigning officially begins for the Tokyo Assembly with 127 seats at stake and the most number of candidates running in more than 20 years. Details after the break. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. Reaction from around the world to Israel's airstrikes on Iran. China says it's very concerned, and Japan has condemned the attack. In the meantime, condolences for the Air India crash pouring in from the region, including from Chinese President Xi Jinping to India's Narendra Modi. And North Korea says it has successfully refloated a damaged warship after a botched attempt last month, and it's planning to build 2 more next year. Well, in Japan, campaigning has started for Tokyo's Metropolitan Assembly election, with 127 seats up for grabs. Well, the poll is seen as a bellwether for July's upper house election. And the focus is on whether Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's Liberal Democratic Party can retain its seats as his cabinet's approval ratings sink. Mr. Ishiba said earlier on Friday that the LDP will do everything in its power to get its endorsed candidates elected, stressing the party's ability to resolve broader regional issues. Well, for more on this, CNA's Michio Ishida, she joins us now live from Tokyo. First up, Mitch, what exactly are the issues on the table as candidates begin their campaigning?
Well, Telly, concerns for consumers here in Tokyo today is about the rising cost. A consumer price index in Tokyo in May rose 3.6% compared to a year ago. It's the highest rise among G7 countries. And many political parties here have been calling for sales tax reduction or abolition, but not the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The LDP proposes a subsidy of 1 million yen, about $7,000 for home purchases to families with children, and 20,000 yen, or about $140 for monthly home rental fees. And the second largest party in Tokyo, called Tomin First, founded by Tokyo Governor Ms. Yuriko Koike, wants to distribute 5,000 yen, about $35 to every child under 18, set up a scholarship, and raise the basic income of those in the healthcare industry. And the biggest national opposition party, Constitutional Democrats, proposes setting up a new home rental scheme and lower tap water fee with no time restriction attached. You see, Tokyo Governor Ms. Koike implemented a temporary measure for this summer, lifting a basic fee for tap water for 4 months. So residents here will instead pay for air conditioning to beat the summer heat. These are policies for Tokyo, not for the whole nation. Now, Election Day is on July the 22nd. It coincides with the last day of the ordinary Diet session. And in terms of reflection of national policy, some analysts say, depending on Prime Minister Ishiba's handling of rising costs, rice, and ongoing U.S. tariff negotiation by his envoy, Ryosei Akazawa, who left for Washington this morning for his 6th negotiation, it could impact this assembly election.
Yeah, so that's what I mean, you see. Just give us a little bit more information about how the outcome possibly impacting Japan's upper house election, which I believe must be held by July 28th. And how is that also going to affect Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba's Liberal Democratic Party?
Yeah, well, Tokyo, as you know, is the most populated prefecture city in Japan. As of March, 11.54 million have the right to vote. It's the biggest local election in Japan, along with the Tokyo gubernatorial election. And people from all over Japan come to study, work in Tokyo, so analysts think Tokyo best represents national perception. Now today, on the first day of campaigning for the assembly election, political party leaders or recognized parliamentarians went out to the streets calling for public support, laying out their policies. Now, there are 127 seats in the assembly, competed in 42 constituencies in Tokyo. The LDP had the most number of seats with 33, but did not have a majority. And they're actually in trouble as they could not field as many candidates as they wanted to due to their political fund scandal. Now, Tomin First, led by Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike, had 31. And Tomin First won 55 seats in 2019 assembly election, and with coalition with Komeito, held a majority. Now, Prime Minister Ishiba has been suffering from low public approval rating, as you know. At one point, it slumped to below 30%, according to media polls. And it's actually been recovering this month after new Agriculture Minister Shinjiro Koizumi took speedy action to respond to shortages of rice and price hike by gaining retailers' support to rush out reserved rice to consumers. Some analysts say electorates may decide on their votes with that in mind. So the outcome at this point in time is unpredictable.
Mm-hmm. All right, wait and see we shall. Thanks so very much, CNA's Michio Ishida, live from Tokyo. Staying in Japan, Tokyo is readying a $700 million emergency package to attract overseas researchers. Nikkei Asia reports that the planned move comes amid an exodus of talent from America under President Donald Trump's policies. Now, on top of the $700 million package, a larger $70 billion investment fund set up earlier for the country's universities will also be tapped to improve salaries and research environments. Reforms, too, will be made to cut bureaucracy and red tape, problems critics have often said hinders research at Japanese universities. Already, top institutions in the country are moving to take advantage of the situation. Japan is not the only country hoping to attract American researchers. In China, institutions are offering large sums of money on top of what is seen as generous university salaries and research funding from the central government. Well, outside the region, the European Union as well wants talent. The bloc said in May it is investing nearly $600 million to bring in experts. Now, the world's 9 nuclear-armed states have spent a combined $100 billion on their atomic arsenals last year, $10 billion more than 2023. That's according to the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN. The NGO said the extra spending could have gone to modernizing and, in certain areas or other cases, growing nuclear arsenals. America recorded the largest annual increase, and its near $57 billion bill exceeds the combined spending of all other nuclear-armed countries, including China, Russia, India, and North Korea. ICAN said that global tensions could have contributed to last year's increase, and says the money spent could have paid for the United Nations annual budget 28 times. Well, in East Asia, China has the largest nuclear arsenal, and it's believed to be the fastest growing. The bulletin of the atomic scientists estimate that Beijing has some 600 nuclear warheads, with more in production. A Pentagon report last year said that the Asian giant could likely have 1,000 weapons by 2030. North Korea as well, growing its nuclear stockpile and advancing its weapons program. Pyongyang is estimated to have some 40 to 50 nuclear warheads and has been actively testing its missiles for warhead delivery. Now, a North Korean warship damaged in a botched launch last month has been successfully relaunched. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un attended the ceremony and was quoted by state media saying that the repairs did not slow down Pyongyang's naval ambitions. He claimed that plans are in place for the country to produce 2 more 5,000-ton destroyers next year. The North Korean leader also called for the strengthening of its maritime military presence in the Pacific Ocean against what he called provocations by the U.S. and its allies. The destroyer partially capsized at its first launch attempt last month. It was later refloated and repaired. Mr. Kim then had condemned the incident as a result of what he called criminal negligence. A Taiwanese company is testing what could become a new weapon in the island's military arsenal: sea drones. Well, the Sea Shark 800 can carry more than 1,000 kilograms of explosives and travel up to 500 kilometers per hour. Taiwan has been studying how Ukraine used drones against Russia successfully in the Black Sea, and the island is working to transform its armed forces to be able to use similar and often cheaper weapons like these to wage so-called asymmetric warfare against a bigger enemy. Sea Shark's maker says the weapon packs an element of surprise.
在台海的这样的一个局势来看的话，我们的数量远不比中共这边的一个布局。但是如果我们有足够的这个 USV 这个无人快艇的话，其实我们在全台湾各个海岸都做相对的一个部署。那其实他们不会知道我们在哪边，因为这个船非常的小，有它的设计又可以达到这个某种程度上一个逆中的一个效果，所以变成是说步步都是危险。
Now, Taiwan's Defense Ministry's research arm has dubbed its sea drone initiative the Swift and Sudden Project, which has a budget of around $27 million so far. It's seen as a growing need, as the island's navy has fewer than 40 warships, while China has a massive fleet of hundreds, including aircraft carriers and ballistic missile submarines.
台湾的无人机的这个硬体、软体要做的话，我们也能够做出世界一流的无人机、无人船，这个是毋庸置疑的。但是在应用的层面，怎么样让它变成顶尖的武器？我认为这不是只有民间制造商的责任， 这还包括了政府你怎么去看待这个东西，军方你怎么样去模塑这个作战的体系，这样才会是一个比较全面的观点。
Now, Polish President Andrzej Duda says that China's superpower status means it can be a stabilizing factor for the Russia-Ukraine war. The outgoing leader talked to CNA in an exclusive interview with Yasmin Yonkers, who started by asking how he thinks China could help end the conflict.
Over the period of the 10 years of my presidency, I visited China many times. On 2 occasions, I paid official visits, and I held official meetings with President Xi Jinping. We talked many times. President Xi Jinping also visited me on an official visit in Warsaw. And let me say the following. I have never had any doubts that China is such a big superpower that it is able to have an impact on the situation in Russia, and because of that, it is able to be the stabilizer, the stabilizing factor, which can contribute to ending Russian aggression against Ukraine. And I still think the same. I believe that China plays a huge and incredibly important role in stabilizing the world and in keeping peace in the world, and I count very much. When it comes to bringing the war to an end, when it comes to finding a peaceful solution, I count very much on China playing a creative and positive role here.
Now I'd like to bring you back to a few weeks ago here at the Shangri-La Hotel for the Shangri-La Dialogue. The European officials said that European security is now tied to stability in the Asia-Pacific. Just like to get your thoughts on whether you are in agreement with this, and if so, what would that mean for Polish foreign policy?
We are trying to have best possible relations with the possibly broadest group of countries, and that is one of the reasons I'm present here in Southeast Asia now, and in Singapore today. 2 days ago, I also visited Malaysia. But before, I also visited Vietnam. That was a couple of years ago. And on several occasions, I also visited China. I also visited South Korea on a couple of occasions, as well as in Japan. Why? Because we want to build relations. And I would like Poland to have the best possible relations, to have as many contacts as possible in the trade sphere. We are proponents of the most open trade and the possible most open way to transport goods. We are an ambitious nation. Poland has witnessed rapid development in the last years. Polish economy is getting more and more robust and strong. We have got excellent experts, especially in those sectors which today are of top importance, setting trends. I'm speaking here about IT sector, also about modern technologies. We have got a lot of excellent engineers in Poland, well prepared, and the world is really very much interested in Poland from this perspective. This makes me very happy. But I came here also to Singapore in order to encourage potential investors from Singapore to invest in Poland, and also to encourage them to tighten bonds between our 2 countries. I believe that through trade links, we are also building security zones, because the best situation is when we can see that it is more profitable to make trade, mutual trade, and doing business than to fight.
Oh, we've got more insights from the Polish leader on NATO defense spending later today. On Asia Tonight at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time. Coming up on East Asia tonight, thousands of people evacuated in China's Hainan Island before the first tropical storm of the year. Plans for Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to hold in-person talks with US President Donald Trump at the G7 summit are in limbo. Well, Canberra's sanctions on 2 Israeli cabinet members and a new US review of a defense pact with Australia and the UK have cast doubt on whether the crucial meeting will take place. Roger Maynard tells us what's at stake for Australia.
Relationships.
This is the first big diplomatic test for Anthony Albanese since Australia's Labor government was re-elected last month. He'll be dealing with a US president who wants defence spending by Canberra to rise from 2% to 3.5% or more. The Prime Minister has politely said Australia will decide how much money it wants to spend and where. Australia has a long military association with the United States in wartime and in peace. The AUKUS deal to buy nuclear-powered submarines from America at a cost of nearly $250 billion is one of many examples of their long-standing alliance. Now all that may be in doubt after the United States announced a review into the agreement. Doubts over AUKUS are not unique to America. In Australia, questions continue over the wisdom of the deal and its effect on overall defence spending.
The Australian defence spending is being cannibalised by its contributions to AUKUS. It's overwhelming the budget for all the other conventional parts of the Australian Defence Forces.
Former anti-submarine warfare officer Jennifer Parker believes AUKUS is important for Australia, but is not a silver bullet.
I think sometimes we're focused too much on this submarine project. It's part of a wider modernisation of the Defence Force that needs to occur. Obviously it gets attraction because it's nuclear-powered submarines and the money. When you think about the defence of Australia, you really need to think about not the defence of Australia's territory, but the defence of Australia's vital interests. Much of that exists in the maritime domain, so we need to be able to protect the maritime domain. When it comes to protecting the maritime domain, nuclear-powered submarines that can go incredibly fast, are a key asset for Australia.
National security considerations aside, there's also the trade issue, and in particular the 50% tariff imposed on Australian steel, which the Prime Minister hopes to raise with President Trump. Mark Kane, Chief Executive of the Australian Steel Institute, fears the real danger facing the Australian steel industry because of the increase in tariffs is dumping by other countries such as China.
Steel is a globally traded commodity, and if countries or businesses can't find a home in the United States for their exports, they'll look elsewhere. And we're an open trading nation, and so the risk for our industry is quite pronounced if we become a dumping ground for that surplus steel that would be awash in the global market.
Over and above commercial considerations and the long-term impact on the steel industry by Trump's tariffs, there's an even more serious dynamic at play, and that's regional instability triggered by America's strategic plans in the Indo-Pacific and Australia's role in any future conflict.
The administration hasn't played all its geopolitical cards in Asia yet. At the moment, it's a tariff war with China. Certainly, I don't think the US is leaving the region or preparing to withdraw, but I think it is making an assessment deep down about what the costs of a potential conflict with China might mean. And that may well be uncomfortable for US allies in this part of the world.
I think it will be a bump in the relationship, but I don't think that Australia should be increasing defence spending because the US says so. Australia should be increasing defence spending because we have assessed there is increased risk in the region, and our capability and our defence force are not resourced to meet that risk.
While defence and trade are likely to dominate these talks, it's Australia's strategic importance that's the key consideration. And right now, in an increasingly uncertain world, both sides arguably need each other. Roger Maynard, CNA, Canberra.
Chinese authorities in the southern Hainan island have evacuated tens of thousands of residents ahead of tropical storm Wu Tip's expected landfall. It's the first storm of the year to hit the region. A state-run Xinhua says affected residents in flood-prone areas and those working on boats have been moved to safer locations. China earlier raised a series of emergency responses as the storm intensified. Officials have been urged to prioritize the protection of lives and property, and emergency working groups have also been deployed. Well, the bad weather has hit operations at several airports, with Sanyas Phoenix International suspending flights since 10 p.m. yesterday and cancelling all flights today. But it is expected to resume on Saturday. Train operations are not spared either. Well, they've been suspended since Thursday afternoon to 8 a.m. Saturday. Wu Tip is currently skirting the western coast of the island province, packing winds of about 90 kilometers an hour. Based on forecasts, the storm is expected to make landfall soon and affect nearby regions, including Guangxi and Fujian, in the coming days. Before we go, we turn to Chile, where a new telescope is set to transform our understanding of the universe, with astronomers aiming to create the largest map of the night sky.
Could this giant telescope help protect the Earth from asteroid threats?
This is one of the world's biggest telescopes, twinned with the world's biggest camera, about to embark on a 10-year mission to see everything that goes whiz, flash, bang in the night.
Using the largest camera ever built, the Vera C. Rubin Observatory in Chile will spend the next decade creating an ultra-high-definition map of the night sky. And according to space scientists, it could transform our understanding of the universe. Located on the Cerro Pachón, a mountain in the Coquimbo region of Chile, the Rubin Observatory boasts super light sensitivity, the widest angle lens, capable of capturing a huge swathe of the sky, and the fastest moving mount for a telescope this size. These features enable the observatory to scan the night sky with unprecedented speed and detail, creating a time-lapse that can spot movement or differences in brightness in faraway galaxies.
When we first started thinking about how would you build the ultimate telescope for astronomy that could look at absolutely everything from what's going on inside our solar system to what's going on out in the universe, billions and billions of light years away. And to do that, you need a really, really big telescope, which is exactly what they've built, plus a really wide camera that allows us to map the entire visible sky every 3 to 4 days.
Its mission includes mapping out all the asteroids in our universe, tracking their path, trajectory, and potentially identifying any on a direct collision course.
Astronomers and space scientists are working on how to deflect things if an asteroid is coming in our direction, but it's going to be the Rubin Observatory that spots it because it can see things that are moving across the night sky.
The Legacy Survey of Space and Time project is funded by the US National Science Foundation and the US Department of Energy. The data produced will be analysed in Scotland, France and the US. It will also be made available to scientists around the world and will help answer fundamental questions about astronomy,
including what's going on the dark side of our universe, the mysterious dark matter and dark energy that seems to make up the majority of everything that's out there.
And on that note, we wrap up Friday's edition of East Asia Tonight. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can also find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for your company.